All right, welcome everybody back again to the Independent Voter Project. I'm joined here and set by Kara, who you all know from our East Coast nonpartisan reformer, Kara. Ethan is in the background with his soothsaying voice.
I'm here. Still here.
Yeah. And we have a special guest today, Chris Papst, Emmy Award-winning journalist and author of a book, Failure Factory. And, Chris, why don't you pop in here, tell a little bit about yourself and why you're on a show and why you want to talk to, folks that are all over the political map like us.
Sure. So, yeah, my name's Chris Papst. I work for a company called, Sinclair Broadcast Group would be my parent company, and they own a station called Fox 45 News, one of our stations in Baltimore. And I'm on a team called Project Baltimore. And what we are is we're a team of five. There's two photographer editors, two producers, and myself as the reporter. And in January of 2017, so 9 years ago, we launched and we've been focusing on one topic and we've been reporting on one topic for the past 9 years. And that topic is public education. And it started in Baltimore City. And over the years, it's sort of expanded to the communities and the counties around Baltimore. And now we really cover public education throughout the entire state. And I wrote Failure Factory. And what this book is it's 8 years, the first 8 years from 2017 to 2025 of our reporting, all put into one place. And what we have uncovered, what we have discovered from how much money is going into the public education systems and what the return on that investment is for taxpayers as far as student academic outcomes, and also what's really going on inside many of our schools, the grade changing manipulation of data to make schools appear better or safer than they actually are, violations of public records law because schools do not want people to know what is actually going in, what is actually happening inside of these schools, because as we know, we can see throughout the country that public education spending is skyrocketing, but student academic outcomes are remaining stagnant or even going down. So what Failure Factory is really to show the entire country what is happening inside of our schools and why we are seeing so much money go into schools, but yet student outcomes are not increasing.
Yeah, I mean, across the country, and I know it's kind of common trope of people looking at our education system. It used to be like the envy of the world, and especially when you go all the way up to our university levels. So, I mean, we kind of feel a bit, a lot of times these debates, they get into the partisan debate, and then it's like, okay, well, no, Democrats need to support public schools. And then if you're a Republican, you need to support charter schools and private schools. And right. But the discussion never gets about like, what about us that like believe in public schools, also believe in the right to have a private school, but we just want better education. We want more educated kids, right? What's the elevator version, or the now I guess we say the Chat GPT summary of your book, and like what are the takeaways that a voter who's not interested in the political discussion about schools, but just wants to know how we get to better education?
So this is not a political book. So I am
Mm,
a journalist, and
mm,
my intent here is not to tell people anything. My intent is to show, and that's what journalists do. We show. So what Project Baltimore and what Failure Factory does is it shows you the numbers. It shows you how the school system is spending money. It shows you what the academic outcomes are over the 8 years that Project Baltimore has been here and that we've been doing this type of work. And the book doesn't mention Republicans or Democrats. It doesn't mention conservatives or liberals. That is nowhere in this book because that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to show people data through a certain lens. I wanted to show people the data and then they draw their own conclusions. And all I'm doing is I'm steering you through how to look at the data and how I got the data. And at the same time, talking to the parents, talking to the students, talking to the teachers, and talking to the administrators that make up that data to get a full rounded approach of what's going on here. And this is not an academic book. It's written in the way that I'm talking to you right now because it's just written in a real way. And the people that I talk to are just real people just like us, but they're making up this data. And I mean, just to get just a couple data points here that we can sort of point to is when Project Baltimore started in 2017, Baltimore City Schools had a $1.3 billion budget. In 2024, which is the last year for which we have data because educational data lags a year, it was 1.7. There's a $1.7 billion budget. So the school system got $400 million additional dollars a year from taxpayers, about a 30% increase in funding. But between 2017 and 2024, the graduation rate remained unchanged. It was 70%, the lowest in the state in 2017, and 70% in 2024. Math proficiencies, which many people would say in today's world, being able to do math is one of the, if not the most important skills. In 2017, the math proficiency rate was 11%. 11% of the kids in
Unbelievable.
Baltimore City were proficient in math. In
11. At
2020,
what grade level?
all of them, the whole school system. So in 2024, with 400 million additional dollars going into the school system, the math proficiency rate was 10%. It went down. So you have 90% of your kids in Baltimore City Public Schools that are not proficient in math, with taxpayers giving that school system a 30% increase in funding over 8 years. Now, all of the data in this book comes from the federal government, the Maryland State Department of Education, or Baltimore City Public Schools. None of this data is Chris Papst data. It's all government sources. And that's what I'm saying. If you look at this data, you can really start to analyze what's going on and what the school systems prioritize and what they don't prioritize.
So, what percentage of that, what did you said is $300 million?
400. Well, there's $400
Sorry.
million increase in
Of
funding.
So, I'm just curious, what percentage of that went for teacher salaries?
Okay. So in 2017, Baltimore City Schools, according to the Maryland State Department of Education, had 5,149 teachers. 5,149.
Those are the teachers, not the
That's
administrators
the number of teachers the school system had.
that are in the classroom.
Correct, in the classroom.
Okay.
In 2024, with 400 million additional dollars going into that school system, and this is not a joke, this is the actual data, all the data is in the book, the school system had 5,142 teachers. They didn't hire any teachers. They got a 30% increase in pay and did not hire any additional teachers. So the next obvious question is, where'd the money go?
Right.
Well, the school system hired 1,300 employees. They used that money to hire 1,300 additional employees. None of them were teachers. They were director level positions. They were people in the C-suite in central office. They were principals, assistant principals. The money isn't getting to the classroom. So if you want to know why the school system has 70% of their kids graduating, but 10% of the kids are proficient in math, it's because the money that taxpayers are putting into the schools is not getting to the kids. And that is where you can really start to look at how the school systems are prioritizing their dollars to see what their focus and what their priorities are. And
What's the
unfortunately,
average the average salary of a teacher in Baltimore City now? Like, how much do these teachers make?
so if the way that the structure works, obviously, is the longer you're there, the more money that you make. The
Sure.
minimum salary is $60,000.
That's a
So
starting salary? So
yeah, so
when
you're
you
21, 22 years old coming out of college. The starting salary is $60,000. And within a couple years, you can get to $100,000. The pay scale,
within like 2 years or 3 years, that's not
probably
bad.
five or six. If you get
5 or 6 years you teach, you're gonna make around
yeah,
$5,000 a month. Maybe that's probably what, about $1,000 a week after taxes
yeah,
to start, and then you can maybe get up to $1,500 a week?
yes, for 10-month employees. So there's a large percentage of teachers in Baltimore City that are quickly getting to $100,000 because the way that the state laws have now been written is if you get certain certifications, you can get $15,000 a year. If you get a national certification uh, for teaching and you're in a high poverty school, you'll get an extra $15,000 a year. So that $60,000 quickly becomes $75,000. And then you just get a couple years of teaching under your belt and you can get to six figures real quick.
And so is that the 400 million that you're talking about, is it mostly gone towards paying the teachers?
Mm.
Or is
Well,
it mostly gone towards paying these administrators that you're talking about, these 1,300 new administrators?
Well, there's 5,149 teachers in the school system. So
Yeah.
the bulk of the employees are teachers. So the
Okay.
bulk of the money that the school system gets is for payroll, is for pensions, and is for the health care. But the point
So that's
is,
probably part of it too, right, Chris? I mean, it's not that this money is like being used, going straight to the teacher. It's going into the healthcare system, right? Which is, I mean, the skyrocketing costs of health insurance. It has to affect everything, right?
but
It's
that
not
would affect the other 1,300 additional employees that they also hired, of which none are teachers.
also right,
Yes,
right.
yes.
So it's not like it's you know they're not like living on easy street, but
Mm.
but part of the problem is definitely
It's death
sounds
by
like
a
our
thousand cuts. You see it in the
yes.
university system, right? Like, there's so many more and more and more people, administrators in the university systems. I'm out in California and stuff. My son's 4, and I calculate because I'm not good at math either. But it's going to be like $5 million for tuition by the time
Yeah.
my 4-year-old's going to college. It's like it's out of control everywhere.
Well, I
Yeah.
think you've got some great empirical evidence, it sounds like. I'd love to hear it. Do you have any like very, compelling interviews or anecdotal stuff that like you heard from people within the system, that kind of unveiled like what was really going on?
So the part of the 5 years that this book covers is an investigation that we had done into grade changing, where the
Mhm.
school system is taking failing grades, making them passing to matriculate the kids through the school system so that they can eventually graduate, which is how you get 70% graduation rates with 10% of your kids proficient in math. So when we mentioned that number, a lot of people would have thought that doesn't make any sense. How can 10% of your kids be proficient in math, but 70% are graduating? Well, it's because the school systems are pushing the kids through because the school systems are funded based on enrollment.
Right.
And the way that you keep the money coming in is by keeping the student enrolled, by passing them through the grades so they eventually think that they can graduate.
Now this to me really seems like a place where I'm glad you dug in.
Yes.
Right?
So in 2017, we did one of the first big stories that we broke when we launched was that we looked through state data and we found that there were 6 Baltimore City schools that did not have any students proficient in any state testing. So hundreds of kids, 6 entire schools, 0 kids proficient. When we produced that story, it blew up and went viral all over the country, as it should. That's alarming. But I had a lot of teachers that were reaching out to me, some of them from these schools, and they were saying, you realize that these kids are still graduating. And I'm like, well, how's that happening? And they're like, well, an administrator, somebody is going into my grade book, changing a failing grade to passing so the kid can matriculate and eventually graduate.
So the teachers aren't necessarily manipulating these grades, is what
No,
you're
teachers
saying.
have nothing to gain by doing it. No, it's
So
not.
so like an administrator would go into a teacher's grade book and change the grade of a
Yeah,
student?
that's
by
Wow.
the thousands.
Wow.
So what
Holy
we did
cow.
was I had more and more teachers that were coming to me. So I filed a public records request in November of 2017 with Baltimore City Public Schools. And I was requesting emails, documents, internal investigations related to grade changing. Well, they didn't give me anything. They said, go away. We're not giving you anything. So we sued them. And in December of 2017, Fox 45 sued Baltimore City Public Schools. In February of 2019, it went to court, and I testified before Circuit Court Judge Jeannie Hong for a few hours. And in March of 2019, she issued her ruling. And that really is what propelled this book to what it is today, was her ruling. And what she ruled was that city schools willfully and knowingly violated the law by not handing over the documents. What she said was
That
that
was
the
through
schools—
a Freedom of Information Act request or the Public Records
Yes,
Acts of
it's a public—
Maryland?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So it was a Public Information Act request. And what she said was the school system knew they were violating the law by not releasing the public documents, but did it anyway to hide, and these are her words, potential wrongdoing. So what the judge did was she really laid the smack down on the school system. And her ruling is in the book for you to read. And she told the school system, this never should have happened. Fox 45 never should have had to have sued you. So you have to pay their legal fees. And it turned out to be about $200,000. So taxpayers had to pay our legal fees because the school system refused to hand over documents that the taxpayers owned anyway because they were public records. And then what we ended up getting from that were 8,000 emails, 24 internal investigations related to grade changing that showed it was a systemic problem throughout the
Wow.
entire school system. And the inspector, I'll just sum it up real quickly here. The inspector general for education, after we won the lawsuit, did an investigation, and he found in a 4-year period that there were 12,542 improper grade changes in Baltimore City, failing grades changed to passing without any extra work being done by the student.
Uh,
12,542. And he
yeah,
estimated that as many as 10% of kids were graduating who should not have.
I
And
bet it's
that
higher.
5-year period is all laid out in here because it's so important. It's so important because these kids are not getting the proper education, but the school system continues to get more funding.
well, wow. Well, you look at it, and then the average voter goes, okay, that's going on. Well, how do we hold somebody responsible, right? And
Mhm.
and
Or
stop it,
how do we make
right?
sure that these kids start getting, you know, better education?
Well,
Sure.
it sounds
Yes.
like a system where all the incentives are wrong, right? The
Right,
incentives are
exactly.
going to the wrong people.
Right.
So how do we reform that, make it better? What's the
So
answer?
I'll tell you what happens here in Baltimore is so the story that we did with the 6 schools with no kids proficient in math. Okay. I thought personally that that was a mic drop moment. I thought I'd come to Baltimore. I'm 5 or 6 months into this Project Baltimore concept. We do this story, it goes viral. There's going to be outrage and everything's going to change. That's what I thought was going to happen. And it turns out the exact opposite. Within Baltimore City, there were crickets. The elected officials in Baltimore City do not hold the school system accountable. They continue to tax the people more. They continue to give more money, massive amounts of funding to public education, but then they don't expect the schools to better educate the kids. And the story that we did with the 6 schools, we've done many of stories like that over the past 8 or 9 years. Many stories like that. And they're all outlined in Failure Factory. And in each one of them, people outside of Baltimore are outraged. People outside of Maryland are outraged. But the people inside of it, the elected officials inside of it, they don't say anything. So if we want to fix the problem, people have to vote for public officials that are going to hold the school system accountable. And I'm not necessarily meaning the governor. I mean school board. School board elections are hugely important, and a lot of people see them as an afterthought. They are massively important. Your
Mhm.
local state delegate, local state senator, your city council member, if you're in a city, you have to vote for people that are going to say, listen, if I'm going to take the taxpayer dollar and continue to give it to the school system, you better have more than 10% of these kids graduating who are proficient in math. Nobody thinks that's acceptable, but in Baltimore, it is accepted.
Well, this is just one of those issues. I mean, we see in our polls time after time again across ideology. Corruption and waste is a top issue, and even that gets partisanized. With Doge and all that stuff. But like, it doesn't matter. People know, like, people don't know exactly how it's happening, but they know there's so much waste and fraud. It seems like the answer. I mean, here in San Diego, it's let's raise our parking fees and let's put parking fees on a park that like would never had them before. And that's how we solve the problem instead of going out and ripping out the waste and holding people accountable. Unfortunately, that's the state of politics we live in. But it's thank God for folks like yourself who go and like, no, here is how it's happening. So now the question though is like, now we even know what's wrong. Like, but how do we go solve it?
Well, this is the thing, Chad. It's like the sunlight is super important, right? The research, the sunlight, the metrics, the data, being able to win your Freedom of Information Act lawsuit to be able to unearth these documents that would not, nobody's going to give over this stuff, even though you're right. That's a public record. You were just asking for public records. That judge was right. You were right to ask. That judge was right to give it to you. So now that's like all in the open, but still like the government isn't giving the people what they're paying for. The government isn't giving them what they want, which is children in school taught by proficient teachers who are being paid properly to get a really good education. Like, how hard can that really be? Like, is
It's
our
not hard.
is our political dysfunction? Is it the political dysfunction? Is it the bad governance that is at the heart of this? Is it that the non-responsiveness of our elected officials to what it is that we really want, that we think we're paying for, that we deserve, that our children deserve? Like, what the heck? You know?
Sure. So I think there's a couple of quick answers to that. The first is that the CEO of Baltimore City Public Schools started on July 1st of 2016, about 6 months before Project Baltimore began. Everything that we have mentioned so far in your show, the same leader has presided over that.
Wow.
So 70% graduation rates that haven't changed in 8 or 9 years, 10% of kids proficient, violating public laws, violating state law, and having to pay a private organization's legal fees. 6 schools with no kids proficient in anything. And the list goes on and on and on. That person's still there today as we're talking because the elected leaders in Baltimore City do not hold the school system accountable. Now, that person, the CEO of the school system, makes total compensation of $500,000 a year. So if you want to know why this continues to happen, it's because if you're making roughly $500,000 a year and your bosses who are essentially the mayor and city council aren't going to say to you, you need to improve the quality of education, which they haven't, why would the quality of education improve? I mean,
Well, it
we all,
wouldn't. You're right. The incentives
yeah,
the incentives are bad, but ultimately, isn't that the people of Baltimore who are electing people who would keep
yep,
someone in power? So it's like it does go back to the voter,
yes.
and the voters having to have their elected officials be held accountable for this failure.
Absolutely. That is 100% correct. And that's what we're not seeing. So the people in Baltimore City, the boots on the ground people, and I've received multiple NAACP awards. So, and this is where the national NAACP is located. This guy. I don't know if people are watching or listening, but I'm a white guy, and the Maryland state chapter of the NAACP has given me awards for the reporting in failure factory. So
Wow.
the boots on the ground, the people on the ground understand what's going on, but it's the politicians who are looking the other way. But yet, it seems like the boots on the ground, the everyday people, aren't voting for different politicians. They keep voting for the same people. And that is something for me that I have a hard time wrapping my head around, that I've been doing this for 9 years.
Right.
And I know when I walk through the Baltimore City, I'm going to say this in the most humble way that I can. Almost everybody comes up to me because I've been doing this for 9 years, hard-hitting journalism, best-selling book. People know who I am. So what we're doing is getting great feedback, and people thank us all the time. And that's exactly what journalists are supposed to do. They're supposed to provide information to the community to make a better community for all of us to live in by giving people the information they need to vote. But yet the people keep voting for the same politicians that aren't holding the school system accountable. And that is something that 9 years I'm still trying to figure out.
Yeah, well,
I know we've gone longer than usual on these, and because you had a lot of good stuff to say, Chris. I mean, I think that's why at the end of the day, Independent Voter Project looks at the elections themselves. Like, how have we aligned the incentives of running for office and being held accountable by the voters, and then ultimately, how does that affect every single issue? And something as important as educating our kids, as somebody with a 3 and a 4-year-old, right? Like, I'm really looking into the school system and stuff now, and I know a lot of folks are. So, I thank everybody for coming, listening to Independent Voter. Chris, thank you for joining us. If you have any last words for our viewers, where can they find your book? What can they do?
Sure. Thank you. So the book's called Failure Factory: How Baltimore City Public Schools Deprive Taxpayers and Students of a Future. It's available anywhere books are sold. And, I really wrote this book because I want this book to make a difference. I want people to understand what's happening in our public education system so that it doesn't replicate what's happening in Baltimore City. Everything that we just talked about doesn't get replicated across the country. And it's happening. We can see it happening. And I'm hoping that we can really enlighten people about what's happening, take them inside of the classroom so that we can prevent really what would be catastrophic for America if our public education system does not improve. It has to improve, and there's a pathway to do it. There's ways to do it that I talk about in the book. We can do it. We have to do it. I am optimistic. I am hopeful because we don't have a choice. We're going to be in big trouble if our schools are failing.
Chris, it sounds to me like you might want to try to run for office.
I know. Where's Chris for mayor?
You know, I think that as a journalist, and I don't know how this is going to come across, I think journalists in many ways have more influence than politicians because the mayor is going to be gone in 4 years and I'm still going to be here.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at things from that perspective, it's once you've been doing investigative journalism for so long, you really do fall in love with it because it's something that I've been working 25 years on, honing a craft. And, you know, I love it. I want to keep doing it. And I think we're making a positive impact.
Well, it's difficult. You see less of it these days. Investigative journalism. I mean, go into the lack of funding and stuff in the media space and everything. But it's good to know that there's folks out like yourself out there that are still doing real journalism, real investigative journalism. We're going to write a story on this. We'll post the podcast to our listeners. You know, you'll be able to find it on ivn.us. You'll be able to find it on wherever you listen to podcasts. And, you know, Ethan will probably put together some good reels that will go on our social media.
There's some good clips in there.
Yeah. So
Sure.
I can already see some of the stuff you're going to be putting together. So thank you again, Chris, author of Failure Factory. You know, I hope we can bring you back on again.
I'd be honored to come on anytime that you want to have me back on. I mean, there's a lot of topics that we didn't get to.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we could go on for another couple hours, but so we'll do it again. Please reach out to us anytime. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
This is the Independent Voter Podcast, sponsored by the Independent Voter Project and produced by OLAS Media. Remember, you can always find the Independent Voter Podcast or the How It Really Works series at ivn.us. Follow and subscribe at olasmedia.com.
OLAS Media.